So today I'm going to test three different vegan pistachio recipes. And what are the key ingredients and the strategies to make a vegan pistachio, or in general a vegan recipe? Now we are testing three different vegan pistachio recipes, and what I want to do is also to check the overrun in the three cups. In the first recipe we have a traditional recipe with sugar, sucrose, dextrose, maltodextrin. The second one contains only agave syrup, and the third one contains again the traditional sucrose, dextrose and maltodextrin, but we have less pistachio inside, and we also have the cashew nuts. There are of course a lot of possibilities. My favorite starting point is always to start with water and sugars, the characterizing ingredient, in this case pistachio, and then a certain amount of sugars, different types that we can use. In this way we know exactly what is the flavor of pistachio that we are using, and we are able to have a very defined recipe. Then we can later on substitute water with, for example, oat milk or with rice milk if we want. Plant-based drinks have always a flavor, so they might leave aftertaste that we are not satisfied with. Starting with water allows us to start with a plain and neutral flavor, and then we can always add oat milk or any plant-based drink later on and see how the flavor changes and if it's not a problem for us. In general, in terms of nutritional values, there's not much of a difference between plant-based drinks and water for what regards the recipe formulation. So the recipe of today, they contain about 15% of nuts and less than 20% of sugar, and then a lot of fibers. Fibers are really useful when we want to make vegan gelato and we don't want to add too much sugar. Because of course we can make a sorbet, a pistachio sorbet with 30% of sugar, but it's going to be very sweet and very difficult to eat. So I prefer to lower the sugar and use a certain amount of fiber that can go between 4 and 7%. In the three recipes that I'm testing today, the first one will have three different types of sugar: sucrose, dextrose and maltodextrin. The second one will have only agave syrup. That agave syrup is made by a combination of different sugars, but it's extracted like that from the agave. And then the third one will be again with sucrose, dextrose, maltodextrin, but we will also add cashew nuts. In these recipes I'm not adding any other fat, but if we want to lower the amount of nuts, we can add, for example, coconut oil or palm oil or palm kernel oil. Palm oil and palm kernel oil are not well seen in general if you're making a vegan product, so coconut oil is probably the best option. Obviously the mouthfeel and the resistance to melting in the mouth will be completely different. Also the taste if we reduce the amount of nuts. But that's absolutely a possibility to make a cheaper product. Now let's start the test and let's see what comes out. To make our vegan pistachio, first we measure all the powders in the recipe. After the powders we are adding the water, or we can put the water on top of the powders. Then we add the fiber syrup. And at last we are adding the pistachio paste. Now we are going to mix everything together. So when we use cashew nuts, we put them in our high shear blender, and we can mix them with water or with part of the water in the recipe. Now we are going to mix our cashew nuts with water until they are very smooth and the particles are very small. After mixing the cashew nuts with the water, we add them back to the rest of the ingredients, so the pistachio, the water and the sugars, and then we blend again all together. After mixing, we are going to pasteurize. We bring the mixture to 85 degrees and then cool it down and freeze it. After pasteurizing, we let the mix into the batch freezer and then we freeze it. Now we are ready to extract our vegan pistachio. Now we are extracting the second pistachio made only with agave syrup. The structure is very similar to the first one, but we have to taste. How's the mouth feel? In the combined machine we have the first step, that is pasteurization, and we pasteurize our mix of pistachio at 85 degrees, and then we let it down in the batch freezer and if we freeze it. This is our third test that contains cashew nuts. Now we are measuring the weight of this cup of the first test, which is 80.5 grams. Now we have the second test, and this 76.7, so a little bit less. There's a bit more overrun in the second test. video up and talk about what are the key points on making a vegan gelato, especially a pistachio. So, the first element is of course to use a lot of pistachio. We cannot make a decent vegan pistachio with only 5-6% of pistachio. We want at least 10 or even 15% of pistachio paste or grinded pistachio. Then we don't want to add too much sugar because it will overpower the flavor of pistachio. Secondly, we want to add some type of fibers or different types of fiber in the same recipe to reach 5-7% of the total amount of fibers. At last, a little bit of salt is always useful, and another very important thing to do is to start formulating with water, and then if we want we can always exchange water with a plant-based drink like rice or oat or other plant-based drinks. If you want to learn how to formulate this recipe and many other vegan recipes, and you want to know all the secret to make a very good vegan gelato, subscribe to the Gelato.expert Academy, and specifically on the module of vegan gelato. If you haven't done it yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel and keep following our videos about the behind the scenes of the gelato world.